If you're innovating, creating, or making a difference, this show is for you. Welcome to Over Coffee. I'm Dot Cannon. Here on Over Coffee, we talk with artists and innovators about the process of changing the world in terms of what they do.
We started asking students to think about a problem in their lives or their family or the community and look at a process that they would use to invent a solution to that problem. There are usually 3 judges, and those people are listening to each of those students describe what the problem was, what the research was, what the solution was that they came up with. This is the most important work I think I have ever managed to engage in. I think it is the most important kinds of learning that students can encounter.
Since 2017, the California Invention Convention has been challenging young inventors, grades K through 12, to use their natural curiosity and imagination to make a difference in their worlds. Every spring, California Invention Convention hosts statewide events. These happen in both Northern and Southern California and give students a chance to showcase the projects they've created, either through their schools or their after-school programs. At the core of these special events is the concept of invention education. California Invention Convention has trained a number of teachers around the state in invention education as the program continues to grow, welcoming new schools and training more new teachers annually. Brenda Payne is the executive director of California Invention Convention. Brenda, what do you remember very best about your own student days that inspired you to make education your life's work?
Well, that's actually an interesting question for me. I hated school until I was in about the 5th grade when I had a teacher named Mrs. Simon, who was a project-based teacher, and had us write our autobiography. And the autobiography was each week or so, we added another chapter. And so it was when I was born, and then it moved into what I want to be when I grow up. And I wrote in there that I would like to be a teacher like Mrs. Simon. And fast forward a number of years, I decided, it also said that I would be married and have 2 children. So fast forward, and I got married and had 2 children and went for my first interview and brought my autobiography from 5th grade with me and explained that I was married, had 2 children, but I had not yet become a teacher. And so I need to fulfill that last qualification that I had for my life's work. And so they hired me. And that was the beginning of my educational career in Roanoke Park. And that led to what I ended up doing a little bit later.
Yay, Mrs. Simon. So that really sounds like that was the beginning of your understanding of invention education and project-based education.
Well, that was the beginning of the project-based. My beginning of invention education began with an older brother that I had, and he worked at Bell Laboratories in Murray Hill, New Jersey, and worked with some of the first people that went further with AI many, many years later. This was in the early 60s, and I'd go visit him and see all of these absolutely fantastic inventions that were happening. This is the time when computers had mainframes that took up the entire floor to ceiling of Bell Laboratories. And you could walk into the dead room and not hear an echo at all or anything, just dead sound. And a voice wave would just sort of follow through the air and hardly be able to be audible. And then I got to watch people who were working with dance on computers for the first time and music with computers. My brother was involved also with art and computers and had an exhibit next to Andy Warhol at the Museum of Modern Art way back then, which was a digital art piece that he put together. So all of that made me realize that invention was something that was really a cutting edge kind of way of thinking. And that is what started me in thinking about invention education.
It's fun that in the 60s you saw dance and music as related to computers. That's revolutionary for that time.
That's absolutely right. And on a smaller computer. So the beginnings of desktop kinds of computers where I could walk in and see something like that and talk to Hal from 2001, who was housed there, and he would answer.
With that wonderful soft voice. I can't do that, Brenda. I love that. Before we get a look at the invention convention, I'd love to hear a little bit about any dance project or music project you especially remember from that time.
Oh, it was just seeing a choreographed piece of music on a computer that was with stick figures, at that time, just being able to show what that might look like. And so my brothers had a good friend, Mike Knoll, and Mike Knoll was working in that realm way back when. So it was just fascinating to see something on a screen that you could direct and to see all that was going on there. I mean, it just was so eye-opening that the world was about to take some major shifts in new directions.
Imagine you and I saw that, and now here we are, 21st century, about to talk about young people training for the future.
That's
Would you
right.
tell me the story of California Invention Convention?
So when I got my first job, I had many students who were second language students, some third language students. There were students with just learning disabilities at that time, that needed extra help in classroom settings. And we were looking for something. I ended up teaching with a very dear friend of mine who became my third, fourth grade colleague. We both taught third, fourth grade, and we opened up our sliding door at a school called Hahn Elementary in Rona Park, and we had 60 students all the time. And we were looking for something that could meet the needs of all those students. And we happened upon a gifted conference that had a program called Invent America. Invent America was the forerunner of the invention conventions that we're seeing today. And so we came back with lots of new ideas. However, there was very little curriculum that was available. So we wrote curriculum for it, for the classes. And we started asking students to think about a problem in their lives or their family or the community and look at a process that they would use to invent a solution to that problem. And it caught on. It caught on in our district at that point, so that a lot of schools started using that. And we had a big invention convention, sort of our first invention convention in a recreation center that was in the middle of town. And then it went to another district, and then pretty soon there was another district. And bit by bit, it sort of caught on. And then both of us became principals at different schools. And I took my goods with me. And periodically, I was at 5 different schools. I ended up in Santa Cruz, California. And I was at 4 schools here, and I was at a school in Rona Park. And I'd hand out some of the curriculum to the different teachers, and one class here, one class there would do some inventing with their students. And then I became the interim superintendent in Davenport, California. After I retired, I stayed retired for, I think, 3 months. And then
You just couldn't retire, right?
it was not my forte. So I ended up working with a teacher up at that school in Davenport that was looking for how do you do project-based education. I said, well, if you're interested, I'll teach a class in your classroom in invention education, and you can watch and participate, and that'll be sort of an instructional forum for how do you go about it. So she was all in, and we began with one class in Davenport, California, 5th, 6th grade class. And that led to my realizing I didn't have the curriculum anymore because I had given it out. So I called Ohio, which I saw was doing invention education, and they turned me on to a fellow in Connecticut. Connecticut had been doing invention education at that point, I think, for 35 years, something like that, or maybe 35 years. And as a state, they had an invention program that went through much of their state. So I called there, and the person I spoke with, Danny Briere, was on the board of the Connecticut Invention Convention. He said, "Oh, you're in California? Could you do California?" I said, "Oh, I could do California." And so that was in 2015. And by 2016, when I had finished my stint as an interim superintendent, I ended up doing the first training of teachers at the Santa Cruz County Office of Education in invention education. And we flew out Connecticut's trainer, and he trained 60 people who came together to learn about invention education. And that was the start of the California Invention Convention. We had 50 students at our first convention, which we held at a high school locally. And it was totally inspiring when you give young people an opportunity to really think about something that is a problem in their own lives or their family. They're far more interested in coming up with a solution to it than if you give them the problem and you ask them to come up with a solution to something that already exists. So once they can take agency in that way and be able to solve a problem for themselves or their family, they realize how capable they are of perhaps moving on and solving a bigger problem. And we ask that they do a lot of research about it so that they can discover whether, in fact, they are the only people that have that problem, whether it's something that exists for many more people. And ultimately, they are realizing that what they thought was something that was just for themselves an issue really exists for a lot more users out there. And so when they're solving a problem, it's not just for themselves anymore, it's for other people. And that definitely, it gives them a license to think on such a much bigger scale as they continue in that way of thinking.
I love that you're getting them involved in communication skills, getting them involved with research, getting them pretty much to be world citizens.
So, in fact, now that you say that, we would meet different. What Danny's interest was starting a national invention convention. He saw that there were pockets of invention education happening all over the country, but that there was nothing to unify all of those different pockets. And so he started getting us together. We would get together for a meeting at Dearborn, Michigan at the Henry Ford Museum of American Innovation. And we would meet every autumn each year and think about what did we want all these students really to be able to do and how did we want them to go about accomplishing it. And so we came up with a process that we felt would really enhance the whole way that students think about invention. And that involved identifying a problem in your life, your family, the community, even perhaps the world, and then researching it, doing the research to see who is it a problem for and has it been invented already? And in the event that it already is an invention, how can you innovate upon it to improve upon the invention that's already out there? And then we had them think about ideating, just coming up with some ideas for what would that solution look like. And once they see what that solution might look like and they start drawing pictures of it, then they start refining it. And then they start building a prototype of their refined idea. The prototype doesn't have to be working, it can be a non-working prototype, but then they take it out to the public and ask other people, perhaps an expert in dental research because it has to do with something to do with their teeth, or perhaps it's their grandmother who has arthritis, and it has to do with something to make her life a little easier in holding things because of the arthritis. So we have them test out their product and then get feedback and perhaps do a survey of classmates about it. And then with that feedback, rebuild what it is that they had started working on with the improved ideas that people are supplying. And so once they are designing it and rebuilding it, then we have them test it out again and see if they can refine it yet further. What's the feedback they're getting now? And document all of that in something called an invention log. So it's from the start, we want them to be having an invention log that is following their entire process. If they get stuck in the middle and decide they're going on to something else entirely, then we have them document that. What was it that caused them to change their ideas midstream? What is it that is something that really holds for them to see to the end? And when they follow the process and put it all down on paper, then we have them think of that as the way that they are going to have their invention improve upon time. And that is the other piece in all of this, is we want people to keep providing feedback. So by having invention conventions at a school level or at a state level or at the national level, we're asking judges to provide feedback and their fellow classmates. So we have what's called judging circles in all of these different kinds of events that get held, whether it's at the school level or it's at the state level or the national. And that consists of 6 different inventions, let's say, that could be teams or individuals. And the judges, there are usually 3 judges, and those people are listening to each of those students describe what the problem was, what the research was, what the solution was that they came up with, and show what their result was. And then the students and the judges all provide feedback. So it becomes a conversation where your peers are as much involved in what you're doing as the judges or your parents or anyone else. Everyone is there to help you improve upon what you have already done. So that process is very different than what we've seen at science fairs, let's say, which are wonderful for students, but you have one student who is presenting to a judge who stops by, and then you have another judge stop by and he's presenting to that, and the rest of the students don't ever get to really explore what that student has accomplished in the whole process or how they went about it to really enhance their whole effort, everyone's effort in it. So that, to me, has been revolutionary in the way that we go about invention conventions. And it goes from the classroom to the state to the national level. And all of those add more and more to each student's invention until they become the expert in what they're doing. And for me, I'm sure that not every person that we are having invent is going to become an inventor in later life. But I feel that we are going to need every person we possibly can touch to become a problem solver, to be there, to help fix what we are creating in the world today. That is a really key reason why I do this. I'm inspired by what students are able to come up with, and know that if we give them a little bit in the way of talking with them about their inventions, talking about the process, helping them to go through the process, we can turn our students that are often learning a lot that they're not going to remember in later years into people who become creative problem solvers. And that is the key to why I do this and what I think is most important in the whole process.
On the subject of problem solving, what was one of the most fun, creative problem solving instances you've seen?
I'd have to say that for some people that are doing the inventions, this goes back years. I had a kindergarten student years back that her problem was that she would go to bed at night and her mom would tap her belly. And that's how she would fall asleep, with her mother tapping her belly. But her mother would invariably fall asleep before she did. So in kindergarten, she thought, if I could have a teddy bear that had a mechanical arm and the arm could just pat my belly, when my mother gets up, she could turn the switch off and I would be asleep and it would have been a successful invention. It happened that she had a brother with leukemia as well. And when her brother had his medicine given to him, he couldn't have anyone in the room with him. And she thought, and if my brother could have a teddy bear like that, he could feel as though my mother were in the room with him as well. So that led to one of our board members, who happens to be a patent agent, feeling like he wanted to work with this young girl, Vanilla was her name, to create this invention and get a patent for it. So it took them 3 years to get through all the drawings for it and all of the requirements that are there for patenting and get a full patent. But by the end of third grade, she had a full patent for her idea. It had changed over time. And so it went through some ideations of having it have voice recognition. Her mother's voice could be there. It had a heat element. It had music that it could play. It, by the time it got its patent, it had changed a bit, but it still had the basic elements. And so that year, she was about to, by third grade, she was in now entering fourth grade, she was about to be part of our invention convention again. And what she ended up wanting to do, she had written down 10 different inventions by then that interested her in working on. And her mother called and said, can Vanilla please enter 2 inventions this year? I said, well, what is she working on? Well, she was working on gray water in the sink after dishes, and how do you convert the gray water to be usable out in the garden, and how can you get it to the garden? And so that's what she was thinking about by that time. Now, that's much more sophisticated than her initial invention, which was wonderful as a kindergarten. However, by fourth grade, she was now thinking yet differently again. This year, she's in sixth grade. And there she was at our invention convention. And she was now thinking about in her garden, they have orange trees. And when they go to pick the oranges or try to even snap them, it breaks the skin of the orange. And so she started investigating what's already out there. She found something similar, but she decided she could improve upon it. And so she invented a stem snapper that could snap it a little bit further up on the stem and be able to capture it and then bring it down so it wasn't damaged in the process. And she was able to now be thinking in an entirely different direction. But her explanation was so clear and her process was so clear. And the way she went through iterating on her initial invention and then coming up with something that was much better than what she saw out there, that was a really big improvement. So seeing students work from a very early age as a serial inventor, I mean, that's what students become. Once they are engaged like that, they start jotting down ideas wherever they're going because it becomes a part of their reality that they can help solve those problems as well. So they're looking for problems. And that's what we're seeing just throughout all of this. We had one young girl who, her invention a while back, her problem that happened at a very young age is her mother kept saying that her posture was terrible. And whoever I usually tell this to immediately is sitting up.
I almost did when you said that. It's like, okay.
Right? So for years, she sort of ignored that. As many people tell us, you need to sit up straight, you need to stand up straight. She was in that situation when finally she came across the invention program. And she decided she was going to work on posture as part of her invention. So she developed a little gadget that would sit on your shoulder, it'd be attached somehow, and it would give you a little jolt or a sharp little feeling when you were slouching. And that would alert you to the fact that you should be sitting or standing up straight. Well, it turned out when she researched it that there was something like that out there on the market. So she started doing a lot more research and discovered that people who have poor posture as younger people, when they get older, their organs start deteriorating at a rapid pace. And so she started connecting that with the poor posture and having an app that then was showing what's happening with your posture in your body. And that led her to start working with some doctors at nursing homes to see what they could do together to start helping people at the nursing homes and then start working with younger people to correct posture. So that was in itself a remarkable invention that she started working on. The next year, she came up with an early way of determining melanoma. She had a test that could be much quicker than what is being used presently. She, this year, completed her first year at Rensselaer in pre-med, and she has a 7-year fellowship to continue on to get her medical license to work in all of these different fields. So that is sort of, to me, what is the fascinating piece in this. As students start, again, seeing that they have the ability to really make some changes in different areas. And we have students who work each year in medical, someone who's working with retinal issues for people in third world countries, which are hard to detect for those people. And they are able to much quicker find out if they're starting to have problems through an invention that costs the person less than $50 to make. That same person, when COVID was happening and ventilators were so exorbitant to get a hold of, and we couldn't get them quick enough, he came up with a ventilator idea that cost $50. That was his invention that year. So students just find these areas now that they can create some difference in. And I mean, to say which was the best, or I never wanted to be a person who said, oh, yours is better than this person or that person. But it allows the student the ability to continue on into these different realms and pursue those things that they're most interested in. So I finally had to give in at some point and say, okay, we'll accept competition.
I don't want to be a judge. These are absolutely brilliant young people. What are the teachers listening? And they want to know, how do I get this into my school? Or parents listening, how do I get my child into this?
Absolutely. So we train teachers for the California Invention Convention. I've been training teachers through the California Invention Convention to learn how to do this with your students. And it's a process that takes into account, how do you think about inventing? What is that process that we were talking about, the whole iteration of the idea, the build and rebuild? How do you create an effective display board that explains what it is? How do you learn how to communicate your idea in a sufficient enough fashion that you're able to really explain to someone who may know nothing about the area that you have interest in, what it is that you are achieving? So we will train people. People can get in touch with me through the California Invention Convention website. There's a contact us on it. It's www.cainventionconvention.org. And we will be happy to come to your school to train teachers at the school. We started with one class in Davenport. It now has 35,000 students throughout the state of California doing the California Invention Convention. And we have had to split the state into Northern and Central California and Southern California because we've just started expanding at such a rapid rate. So if you have any interest, If you're a parent and your school is not involved, get them involved. If you are a parent, your school is not involved and they are not ready to get involved, you can have your student enter as an independent inventor and get in touch with me, and we will explain how to prepare your student and what needs to happen to become an independent inventor. Everyone would need to have an invention log, a display board, a video explaining what the process was that they've gone through. And then we've tried to, for the last umpty-um number of years, we've been doing this for the last 10 years now, but for the last several, we haven't charged students to even enter the competition. We haven't charged them to be able to be part of this in any way. The materials can be nothing more than a toilet paper insert, the roller from the cardboard insert. It doesn't have to be anything expensive, but we will give you a training in what is the technique of getting students to invent in your classroom. And honestly, having been an educator for 30 years, having been a principal after that for the next 12 years, having been a superintendent after that, this is the most important work I think I have ever managed to engage in. I think it is the most important kinds of learning that students can encounter and get involved with, because it is something that is going to give them, it's transdisciplinary. There are problems that students have playing the cello. A young fellow who was having problems with being a cellist because he'd get blisters managed to create rings for his fingers that were decorative, but then could be used for the strings when he was learning the cello. He went on to become Time Magazine's inventor, young finalist for the Inventor of the Year. So it doesn't have to be in STEM. It doesn't have to even be in STEAM. It can be in anything that poses a problem to any individual to come up with a solution. And we're happy to get involved with your school and train the teachers in how to do this.
Inventionconvention.org. And if I've understood you correctly, if this is an individual student, they don't have to be in California, or they do?
They do. For the California Invention Convention, they do. There are invention conventions in other states. For me, I now see the benefit of having a student be part of a convention and get the feedback from the judges and the fellow students about what they're doing. So I think that so helps the communication skills of every student out there, whether they feel uncomfortable talking normally, whether they're embarrassed to get in front of other people. Once they engage in this, they are their own best person to explain what it is they are doing. And they become a whole other person capable of being an excellent communicator.
How can people best support you as you inspire the next generation of inventors?
How can they support us? Oh, they can certainly support us, one, by becoming judges, two, by becoming volunteers for our state event. They can also support us financially. We have been a lot of people volunteering a lot of time. I try to pay people as they are helping with this. I've been a volunteer doing this for the last 10 years, but it's growing to the point where we truly need to be having more people involved that are being able to help and get remunerated for their efforts. And so also for students to be able to get scholarships to move on to the National Invention Convention. That's a much more expensive proposition once you're moving on to the next level. And so if we can get support for people to do that, if there are corporations out there that would like to get involved, we have corporations that are helping in Southern California. And my interest has always been that of an educator. I'm pretty good at selling what it is that I'm doing, but I don't have the time to really put into trying to raise the funds to do it. So if there's anyone out there that would really like to get your company involved in something like this, we would love the support. And for parents, we will just help you to help your student. I think that's the kind of support we want to be able to provide as well.
And a potential sponsor or potential volunteer can reach out to you through the website we gave before.
That's right.
And while we had fun talking about the Invention Convention, our conversation can't match the actual experience.
The one thing I would tell you is come see what it is if you have any opportunity to do that. Because I think that once you see what it is, you'll be convinced about what I'm talking about. I get pretty passionate about how important this really is for educators to do. But if more and more educators became judges at the event, that is one way to see what it is. If you have any understanding of invention education, I think one thing, I went to a superintendent's conference recently and was amazed always, the second year in a row. I say, are you doing invention education in your district? They have no idea what we're talking about. Wow. It needs a megaphone. We need people out there who are saying, this is important work. This is what we all need to be teaching our kids. So I think that is one of the real key takeaways.
Final question is the signature question for my podcast. If people could only get one thing from you about innovation, creativity, and making a difference, what would you really love them to take away from the work you're doing?
I think the most important thing in all of this is that every student is a creative genius until we make them not be that by telling them, no, that won't work. No, failure is the key to what we do. We need to be able to fail forward. We need to be able to see failure as the most important thing that happens in our life. But only through failure are we going to end up being able to achieve something in the future that is better than what we've done before. So fail, fail, fail. That's what I want people to take away with them.
Brenda, thank you for your time today.
It is my pleasure. Thank you, Dot.
You and I have been listening to Brenda Payne, Executive Director of California Invention Convention. Find out more about teacher training in invention education or about getting involved in the next California Invention Convention, either by getting your school or students involved or by supporting them as a volunteer at cainventionconvention.org. That's cainventionconvention.org. And that concludes this edition of Over Coffee. Thank you for listening. Listen to more Over Coffee podcasts at twomaveriks.com. That's 2 TWO Mavericks, Maverix. Be sure you subscribe. It's free by clicking the link on our website. Our music is royalty-free production music provided by Pond5 at pond5.com. I'm Dot Cannon. Here's wishing you a cappuccino day.